In a world of growing financial inequality, there have been plenty of models that have been suggested to remedy this. One is Universal Basic Income, or UBI. UBI is a proposal that suggests everyone receive a basic amount of money regardless of their background. If this sounds familiar, it's because you're confusing it with means-tested welfare, where only those who can prove that they need financial support because of extreme poverty, illness, childcare duties or other reasons are due government funds. UBI has no means testing. Everyone gets a regular foundation payment without the need to submit evidence to receive it. UBI is nothing new. Its initial inception came centuries ago, but a modern version of the system is being suggested for implementation more than ever in the wake of the 2020 pandemic and automation making more and more manual jobs redundant. Bearing this in mind, is universal basic income becoming more and more essential, rather than just a nice to have? Before we start to explore this, a little nudge to like this video if you're enjoying it, and if you want to be the first to see more videos like this one, then click the subscribe button and notification bell for equity economics. Now back to UBI. The ideology of universal basic income is something that spans back to primitive human times. The idea of looking after the collective was something fundamental to survival with early Homo sapiens. This idea is something that remained with humans for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's only a recent development, since the Industrial Revolution, that people have been more interested in looking after their own families, or even just themselves. If a Kalahari Kung forager met someone with his sister's name, he was expected to treat her like someone in the family. Inuit men had lifelong meat trading partners, which they always gave a cut of seal to. This community-focused ideology appears to be ingrained in our nature, but the modern world has imprinted a more self-serving model on the way we're nurtured. In terms of a more modern, civilized and documented ideology behind UBI, this can be traced back to 16th century England. Philosopher Thomas More, in his socio-political satire Utopia, floats the idea of basic income to decrease numbers of thieves and therefore reduce the murder rate that the execution of these thieves contributed to. American intellectual and architect of the American Revolution, Thomas Paine, had his own suggestion of UBI after studying communities that looked after the collective. His proposals were to give what he called ground rent of $15 once an adult turned 21, which would be followed by $10 every year after age 50. This could be seen as an early suggestion to implement a pension. Paine was insistent that everyone received the benefit regardless of background. The likes of Napoleon were interested in the idea, but it was never implemented. American economist Henry George picked up the baton shortly after the Civil War. His suggestion was no taxes and a pension for everybody, paid for with a public fund. Paine was a direct influence on him, as well as Native Americans' astonishment that children were being put to work in then modern America. Martin Luther King is well known for his groundbreaking work in fighting for racial equality during the Civil Rights Movement, but he is less well known for his suggestions to improve people's living standards across the board. He proposed what he called a guaranteed income in his book, Where Do We Go From Here?, in order to abolish poverty at source. This brings us up to date, and universal basic income is now very much in vogue because of two key external factors driving a need to look after a Western society that is fast leaving its poor behind. These two factors are the 2020 pandemic, which has led to a recession of record-breaking proportions, and also the growth of automation, which is fast making human manual work a thing of the past. Both of these are causing unemployment levels in low-income families to spike, and while the rich continue to profit from both of these factors, the less well-off in society are feeling the pinch. All of this leads to the wealth gap widening even further from what was already a chasm into something that resembles something like the Grand Canyon. We're halfway through our look at universal basic income, so another reminder that if you're enjoying the video, why not give us a like and a subscribe? It won't cost you a single tax dollar. Anyway, back to UBI. The need for something like UBI is becoming so front and centre that former presidential candidate Andrew Yang championed it as policy during his campaign. He called the payment a freedom dividend and suggested this payment be $1,000 every month to those over 18. This was a significant step in suggesting that UBI could indeed be funded and work in a modern society. Yang didn't win, but what this did do is bring UBI into public consciousness, and as a result, the need for more support for those less fortunate has been taken into presidential policy. The American Rescue Plan of March 2021 gives generous tax breaks to low and medium income families, which goes some way to getting closer to the utopian dream that Thomas More had 500 years ago. Even Pope Francis has jumped on the back of the support for UBI. From a moral perspective, he's a big supporter of a universal wage, and in a letter written for Easter 2020, he wrote, "It would ensure and concretely achieve the ideal, at once so human and so Christian, of no worker without rights." Clearly, the most influential in society are starting to take notice, and this is very timely considering that the odds are currently stacked against those from low-income backgrounds, and that's unlikely to change going forward. Of course, there has been criticism of UBI. If it was that much of a silver bullet, it would have been implemented by now. The first and most important criticism is that it's expensive, very expensive. With Yang's proposals, this would cost the government $2.8 trillion each year. To put that in perspective, that was 60% of the federal government's projected budget for 2020. Yang argued this could be paid for using a 10% value-added tax on businesses. The Tax Foundation, in response, claimed that this method, as well as other proposals by Yang, would only cover half the cost of what was needed. Clearly, taxing businesses wouldn't be too popular with those already in work. The other argument linked to this is that those already working claim that UBI gives no incentive to go out and work. Yang has responded to these critics by saying that $12,000 a year is nowhere near enough to live on, so everyone would still be incentivized to go out job hunting. But is there going to be work to find? We've already touched on the fact that automation threatens the very idea of employment. This isn't the first time we've been here. In fact, experts thought that the Industrial Revolution would render everyone jobless, as at the time most people farmed. This dystopian idea didn't happen, and people went on to find different jobs away from farming. The machines created more jobs than they took over, and skilled engineering work created a whole new sector. But it's thought this time around is different, as this generation's industrial revolution features machines we couldn't have even dreamed about decades ago. A 2017 study by MIT and Boston University concluded for each robot, 6.2 jobs are lost. A 2013 paper found that 47% of all current professions are threatened by machines. And it's not just manual work that's facing a human cut. Tax preparers, waiters, and paralegals are under threat, as well as many others. Robots are already better at diagnosing illness than doctors, and autonomous vehicles are literally just around the corner, with 5 million nervous drivers wondering what they'll do next. All this suggests that without something like UBI to help a future unemployed population, then there are likely to be many more people living under the poverty line. Universal basic income is far from a 21st century idea, but might be a 21st century need. Born from an idea of a utopia, the model might actually be needed just to keep a large portion of our population from going hungry in a future world where robots represent the highest sector of the employed. Do you think UBI is something we need for the future? Let us know in the comments, and remember to like this video and subscribe to Equity Economics to get notified of the latest videos, just like this one. Thanks for watching.